Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is December 31st, New Year's Eve around here, and we have a great show for you today. We got to start talking about all of the games that are coming up in the next couple of days. We'll break down the Peach Bowl first. We'll go to the Rose Bowl next. We'll finish it off with the Sugar Bowl. Just kind of roll through the Wednesday slate. Going to be incredible games, and we'll break down the first three just to start the show today. Then we'll get into a little talk around the quarterbacks going into the quarterfinal games. I'll give you my top 8, kind of rank these quarterbacks in terms of how much I trust them, likely in their system, but I'll break it all down in the fourth segment. Then we'll finish it off. We'll talk a little bit of an overview in the quarterfinals. We'll talk about the best storylines, some players to watch on both sides of the ball. We'll talk about the most impactful upset and some injuries you're definitely going to want to be updated on before we get into this. But a lot of different things happening on today's show. But before we jump in, do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that and we can have fun back and forth here. But let's go ahead and jump into this one, and we will start with the one that's about 10 minutes down the road for me, the Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State, and it should be a very good one. I think all of us are very much looking forward to this one. This feels like the one that, if we are going to get an upset, probably would come here. Texas is a team that has struggled at different times, with turnovers and kind of giving teams some extra opportunities in games that they probably haven't earned. Arizona State is more than happy to take those and take full advantage of them, and mainly Cam Skattebo will be the guy doing that. And the big thing here is that matchup. One way or the other, someone's going to have to win it. Texas has the 9th best rush defense in the country. Georgia did have some success there, but overall, they've been absolutely locked down on that part of the ball. And then ASU has been absolutely incredible running the football with Cam Skattebo. They've only faced UCF, who was 29th in the country. That's the next best rush defense they've faced. It'll be interesting to see how much Texas can really slow him down. Now, he averages 4 yards after contact per carry. The kid can run through people. There's no problem with that. So Texas is obviously going to have bigger guys coming at him. They're obviously going to have to, give him a lot of gang tackling, because the reality is you're not getting this guy down with just one guy. He will run through you and continue on for at least 4 yards, maybe a little bit further than that. But going with that, actually, when you talk about this run defense or run offense for Arizona State, it's so incredible to watch. It's really, really talented. The question is the red zone. You do have a remarkable rushing offense. You also rank 114th when it comes to red zone scoring. So field goals are not going to win you this game. Against a Texas offense, especially with the back-end issues that you have that we'll talk about here in a second, you cannot give them extra opportunities. You cannot give them 3 when you could get 7. So once they get into that area where Texas is remarkably good at keeping people out of the end zone, we've seen it the last 2 games, or 2 of the last 3 games with A&M and then Clemson last week, they have to be able to put the ball in the end zone. If Kenny Dillingham, if the Sun Devils have to settle for 3 over and over and over again, you're going to see that lead for Texas just continue to grow. And on the Texas side, you have a lot of different things to talk about here. Obviously, the run defense is going to be a huge part of this, and their run game is going to be a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to attack Arizona State, a lot of it's going to be through the air. They are much worse through the air than they are on the ground. In terms of run defense, they're top 25 in the country. Pass defense, they're below 70. So there is definitely more of an opening passing the ball around. The question is, how much do they lean on that? How much do they need to lean on that? This offensive line for Texas is very, very talented, one of the best in the entire country. How much do they feel like they have to lean into that identity, or do they feel like they can really just kind of let Quinn Ewers go out there and let it rip? Obviously, there's been quite a bit of talk between the two quarterbacks, really more Sam Levitt to Quinn Ewers, but at the end of the day, I think that when you look at this Arizona State team, they are very solid against a ground game. They're not quite as solid when you come to a pass game that can be really prolific, and that's exactly what Texas has, as long as they can keep Quinn Ewers upright. And that's kind of the big thing in this game, where Kenny Dillingham and all of his assistants, they got to find a way to get pressure. They got to find a way to put Quinn Ewers off kilter, because that's the way you beat Texas. That's the way Georgia was able to beat Texas twice, was they were able to put Quinn Ewers in some weird spots. They were able to get guys backed up into his lap. He wasn't able to step into throws. He would make some mistakes. If you can get to Quinn Ewers, a lot of different things can open up for you in this game, especially if you have that run game going and you're not giving that Texas offense all the time in the world to go down the field and make all the plays in the world. So a lot of different things going into this, and if they can't get pressure, they really have to win the turnover battle. One way or the other, they're going to have to be able to force turnovers against this Texas team, and ASU has been one of the best in turnovers this season, only 8 turnovers from their offense the entire year, and then Texas has forced multiple turnovers in 4 of the last 5 games. It'll be interesting. Can Arizona State take care of the football? And then on the other side, can they take it away from Texas? They've been relatively good in that category, and Texas has given the ball away a number of times. So it's going to be one of those games that really comes down to a little bit of the margins. If Cam Skattebo can get going the way that he really has all year, if Quinn Ewers and that offense can really get their feet under him and start rolling, it's going to come down to a couple of plays, a couple of mistakes from Quinn Ewers, a couple of really good play calls from Kenny Dillingham when they very much need him, and I think it's going to be a really fun battle. I think you're going to have really good on really good when you talk about Cam Skattebo against this front 7 for Texas. I think you have 2 of the best play callers in the entire country going at each other with Kenny Dillingham and Steve Sarkisian, and I think you have Quinn Ewers trying to silence the doubters. I think you have Cam Skattebo trying to prove that no one can stop him, like he said a couple of days ago. So it will be absolutely incredible to watch this game. I think a lot of people are circling this one as one to watch a little bit closer than some of the other ones out there, but overall, you're going to have to deal with a lot if you're Arizona State. If you're Kenny Dillingham, you got to get creative in this one. You can't just run at that defense over and over and over again, because you've seen what can happen. You saw what happened against Clemson. You saw what happened against A&M. You run down the middle against this defense, even if you do have Cam Skattebo, who is absolutely incredible and will be able to run through a couple more tackles than some of the other running backs that Texas has faced. The reality is there's too much guys. There's too much dudes in there. There's too many big guys in there that are going to turn you back. So you're going to have to get a little creative in this game. And I think when you talk about players to watch, it's got to be Melquan Stovall. There's got to be tons of wide receivers in this group that are going to make different plays at different times, but this is the guy that can really change this game in a second. This is the guy that can get behind this defense, maybe make that one big catch, and then you look up at the scoreboard, and Arizona State's up 7 going into halftime. He is a huge player in this game, especially without Jordan Tyson on the football field. You got to have other guys step up. That includes him, Xavier Guillory, a lot of these really talented players that can absolutely step up to the plate. This is going to be the toughest secondary they've played all year. There's no doubt about that. And then on the other side of the ball for their secondary, Xavier Alford has to be huge in this game, especially in the first half. Shamari Simmons is going to be out for the first half with a targeting that he got called on in the Iowa State game. That means Xavier Alford and really everyone in that back end is going to have to pick up the slack just a little bit more. Xavier Alford playing his former team will have a little bit more juice to him, I have to assume. So it will be an incredible challenge for him when you have all of these remarkable wide receivers running around the place, and Quinn Ewers, who, if given protection, can absolutely dice you to pieces, especially without one of your leaders in the back end in Shamari Simmons. But one of the receivers you're going to have to worry about is Isaiah Bond. He's going to be back in this game, is fully healthy, is ready to go, and that is a huge thing for this Texas offense. They look very, very different when number 7 is on the field compared to when he is not on the field. He is a hugely important player for this team, and one of those guys that you just put the ball in his hands and you watch him go fly. He's a very, very talented player, and again, something that Arizona State has not faced all year. It is a type of wide receiver, a type of offense that they have not had to really encounter, and it could be a little bit too much for that back end of that defense that has struggled really mightily throughout the year. And then Vernon Broughton. He is the anchor of this defense. There's a million really good defensive tackles on this team, and they've done an incredible job replacing guys like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy from last year. Vernon Broughton is the guy you're going to want to watch. Number 45, he's an absolute nightmare in the interior of that defense, and the reality is Cam Skattebo is a fantastic player, and he is going to make plays in this game. That is no question. If you make him bounce out of the intended gap, it could get a little bit sketchy pretty quickly. If you're making him stay behind the line of scrimmage longer than he's comfortable, then you have guys coming up to gang tackle. So that means getting push on the interior. That means Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins and Bill Norton and Jermaine Lole and all of these defensive tackles getting a ton of push on the interior. I just tend to believe that Vernon Broughton might be the best of the bunch. He's going to have a huge impact on this game, and definitely you will hear number 45's name called a number of times. But let's get to keys to the game, and we'll start with Arizona State. it's got to be the Cam Skattebo show. You're going to want to show plenty of variations off of Cam Skattebo. There's no doubt about that. You don't just want to set up and say, we're going to let number 4 just carry us to a win here, because the reality is you're probably not going to get a win that way. This Texas front 7 is just too mean, too aggressive, and too good to have that be your game plan. That being said, this is the guy that got you here. Much like Ashton Jeanty with Boise State tonight, ride your guy. You have to add variations off it. You have to keep that defense at bay, but the reality is number 4 got you here. I'd ride number 4 a lot of the day on for tomorrow. And then find a way to get home. If you can't get pressure in this game, Quinn Ewers will do insane things in this game. He'll throw for 400 yards. He'll go for 4 touchdowns. And this game will be really ugly by halftime. Arizona State has 20 sacks on the year. For comparison, Clemson had 37 on the year. They got home once against Texas. So they're going to have to get a little creative. They're going to have to use their linebackers. They might have to use a safety or two and coming down and blitz packages, maybe a cornerback coming off a blitz package like Georgia did against Texas. So they're going to have to get creative. This is too good of an offensive line to set up and say, our 4 are going to beat your 5. They're just not. So you're going to have to find a way to get home. If you don't get home against Quinn Ewers, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. And then make Texas play catch up. Texas has been very, very confident throughout the season because there hasn't really been that many times where they can dictate the game. There haven't been that many times where they've been really fully out of a game or really trailing for that long outside of those 2 Georgia games. So you're in a position where if you can get out ahead, say you get out ahead 10-0, 14-0 to start this game, then Texas looks up and they get a little bit nervous. Then Quinn Ewers looks up and he tries to force the ball just a little bit more. He tries to, put the ball into a window that might be just a little bit too tight, and then you get the mistake that you absolutely need. So make Texas play catch up. Play from in front in this game, and then make Texas kind of figure out how they're going to find a way back into this game, especially if they can't lean on the run quite as much as they might want to in this game. And then for Texas, get the run game going early. If you have a run game in this one, it's going to be really hard for Arizona State to slow you down. Now, Arizona State only gives up 117 rush yards per game, so they are very solid. There's no doubt about that. But Trey Wisner, Jaden Blue, those are the 2 most important players when you talk about this Texas title run, especially on the offensive side of the ball. If those 2 guys can have the game like they had against Clemson or even a little bit of a step behind that, they are going to be really, really hard to beat. They're going to be one of those teams that you look up at the end of the game and you've had a couple of possessions that have gone 3 and out. You have a couple of possessions that ended in fourth down stops, and you got 0 points. It's one of those teams that if they can control the clock, if they can control the run game, it's going to be a really long day for just about anyone that plays them. And then stay clean. That means keeping Quinn Ewers clean. That means having a 0 in the turnover column. That means just being the team that does not hurt themselves. Because the reality is, Texas is a remarkably hard team to beat if they don't hand you chances. And they have been pretty good about handing teams chances throughout this year. So if they can stay clean in this game, if they can make sure there's no sacks against this group that really does struggle to do that, if they can make sure that there's no turnovers from Quinn Ewers when he's, perfectly clean, if you can make the right throw, make the right read, and just live for another down, it's going to be really hard for Arizona State to fully slow down this offense. And then trust your back end. That's been the absolute strength of your team pretty much the entire year. You have Michael Taft, you have Andrew Makuba, you have Jade Barron. Malik Muhammad did have a tough game against Clemson. I tend to believe there's not quite the talent level at wide receiver that there was for Clemson for Arizona State in this game. So I wouldn't necessarily be overly worried about that. Commit yourself to stopping Cam Skattebo. If you stop Cam Skattebo, this offense is going to sputter very, very quickly, and it's going to be really, really tough for them to find any openings for those pass catchers on the back end because there will be guys breathing down their neck pretty much when the ball is snapped. So I think we got a great game here. I think we got 2 of the best play callers in the country. I think we're going to have some weird twists and turns. I think Kenny Dillingham is going to be very aggressive in this game if I had to imagine, but at the end of the day, I just think Texas is better. I think that interior defensive line is just going to be too much for them. I don't think Arizona State will be able to get home the way that they need to, and I really expect Quinn Ewers to have a huge day. So I'm going to go with Texas to win this one. I'm going to go with them to cover. I feel fairly confident in this one. I think that interior defensive line is too much. I think Quinn Ewers in this run game will be a lot to deal with for that Arizona State defense that has been really good this year, but has left a little bit to be desired in certain games that they've been tested a little bit more in. I think this will be the biggest test of all, and I think they'll come up a little bit short. It's been a remarkable run for Arizona State. I tend to believe it ends tomorrow around 4 p.m. or something like that. But let's move on forward to the game right after that, which is the Rose Bowl. We'll talk about that right after this break, a rematch between Oregon and Ohio State. Going to be a classic one in the granddaddy of them all, so we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.